I just really want everyone to feel that they're their own rock star. When I'm hiring people, I will literally say, I am looking for a rock star. I want you to rock your own lane and bring your confidence and your magic because I need that. Anything you want to learn, you can, but we're going to be dependent upon you for this so that you're our person. And so it just really works really well in that capacity because I think everyone just feels elevated and important.
Very excited for the podcast today. So we have Michelle Pierce on with us. Welcome, Michelle.
Hey, hello, how are you?
So this is going to be a lot of fun with this episode, Michelle. Michelle is the founder and lead designer of Creative Edge Interiors. And we met through a mutual friend, Tim Nelson, who I know you've done a lot with and is a good friend of mine. He was a former guest on the podcast as well a while back for those that listen. And of course, seeing you at, the Build Magazine events and, all kinds of different events now, essentially since we're in each other's backyard.
Exactly. Our paths are crossing on the regular. I love it. Thank you for having me on today.
Very excited to have you on. And you'll see through this episode, Michelle has a lot of energy, great energy, and honestly, a lot to share, a lot of wisdom for the listeners that I think will be really good. And one thing that captivated my attention, just in prepping to bring you on, you mentioned that you're into habit stacking, and mindset. And I was curious, for you to break that down for us.
Yeah, you know what? It really became super prevalent for me last year. I had entered a new coaching program, and part of the program was really talking about, as in anything in life, mindset is such a huge part of everything that we're doing. I mean, it doesn't even matter how excellent you are at your trade and your craft. If your mind is not in the right place, we're just going to have struggles. And so last year I started, one of my friends actually suggested habit stacking, and I had not heard that term before. So I was kind of asking her, like, what does that mean to you? And she's like, oh, it's basically just when you're combining two of your favorites or two of the things you're trying to do. And so I really started testing that out last summer with my hiking, and I was getting up, obviously, we all get up really early in the morning for our summertime. And that's really where I was really able to just dig into my audiobooks. And for me, it's just such a magical, transformative time for me. I'm out there in nature, doing something physical and, releasing all that energy that I have. And then also just fueling my mind with new ideas and concepts. And then I'm just I'm a big believer in implementing as I go. And so a lot of times I'm specifically like selecting books or audios or whatever that has to do with the challenge that I'm dealing with, whether it's personal life or business and whatever, and just trying to get to that next level. And so I'll go and do all my hiking, get all that good, just infusing of my soul and filling my mind with all of that, especially first thing in the morning. It's just such a magical, powerful way to start my day. And then I'm right into like, how can I implement it? What do I do? And just seeing the transformation happening, you're just obviously, whatever you're doing from a workout perspective, has such a great outlook on, your body, but it also is tapping into that mind side as well. So
Do you ever feel that, habit stacking, and, because it's pretty easy for us to get sidetracked. We have a lot on our plate. There's a lot that's, whether it be personal life, family, it could be business, clients. I mean, we're getting pulled in so many directions, right?
yeah.
Do you feel like, especially, how's the success been? Do you feel it overwhelming at times? How has it been since implementing these strategies?
This is such a good question. And I will tell you, I don't do well when I do it in my own home. I get super distracted. Even driving, for me, driving is usually my quiet time where I just honestly really love either some really great music or just DEFCON silent mode. Because I get really distracted with those things. And something about the energy of hiking and being out there in nature where I'm usually heads down, just kind of focus on where I'm going anyways until I'm looking up and around and, enjoying the nature. I find for myself, as I've tested out when is the best time for me to really be effective at that? That's what works best for me. I know it with a lot of my friends, that's not necessarily the magic time for them. So I think every single person is really going to find, what works the best for them. I know sometimes some people are really good with actually just reading a book and, having the highlighter and making the notes. I find that it takes me longer to get through books, even though I'm a voracious reader. It takes me longer to get through them, and I don't find that as effective as somehow listening to those audiobooks. And then I make a lot of notes to myself, go back to this section. It talks about this specific thing. And so I'm kind of doing notes in my phone of how to make sure I'm able to tap back into a lot of the resources that I have found really magical for myself.
Yeah, it's really smart because really at the core, essentially, you're saying, okay, if I love hiking, okay, that's great. That's a great habit. It's going to keep me active. There's just being outside in general, right? It's very good for the soul.
Yeah.
So you're going to have that aspect. And then if you love to read or the continuing education podcast, whatever it is, so you're essentially doubling up on it. So it may not be as burdensome to go from task A to B to C, but essentially you're kind of doing those concurrently, which essentially should
Yes.
optimize your day.
It does. And I think I find too that because my hikes are longer, I'm able to make it further into the books and really delve into that or go back and listen, as I'm really trying to like cement an idea, or especially if it's something that I've not tried before, but I want to, just really making sure that I'm clear on like what my intention is. And so it works really well for me. I absolutely love it. It's just completely changed my life, and it's just been a really great addition. So, yeah.
Well, you mentioned, this kind of started, you were through a coaching program. How has that been
Mhm.
over the years? Value of having a personal coach, impacts they've made on you and your business.
Unbelievable, like off the charts. I really honestly don't have any words. I'm such a huge believer in mentorship. I believe in being a mentor. I believe in paying it forward, and also, surrounding yourself with people that are more seasoned. They've got great insight, and that way you're not reinventing the wheel. It's just really tapping into everything that you can to kind of further and better yourself. I have loved the coaching, and I think that it's just completely invaluable. And even this year, when my coach was asking, hey, what's your intention for this next coming year? And for me, I know that they're introducing me to theories and concepts and things that are just continually stretching me outside of my comfort zone, which I think is where I need to remain. I think a lot of the magic in our lives comes in when we're willing to do that, no matter how scary or uncomfortable it can be. And I just feel like when you are tapped into people who truly are there to, serve and support you in the same capacity that I'm there for my clients, but they're just bringing me life in a very different way, it has been a life changer. So I absolutely love it. What has your experience been with that?
That's actually a really good question. It's funny because, as you were speaking about that, I'm thinking to myself, like, it's not till recent that I actually have a business coach that's a former member of my Builder 20. So to break it down, we have a
Mm-hmm.
Builder 20, and I've spoken about this on the podcast, but essentially it's a group of 20 builders throughout the country, non-compete. We don't compete. We get
Mm-hmm.
together twice a year, and it's been really great for my business and being in this Builder 20. And I've seen a lot of other builders join Builder 20s, and again, they share the same, words of encouragement, based on how their business changed. Essentially, one of the members, the founding members, has retired and is doing some consulting, and so I hired them, last year,
Mm-hmm.
and it's been incredible. I mean, honestly, Michelle, like, uh, none of us ever have it to the extent that we fully understand business and complexity,
Mm-hmm.
and you know whether it be construction design, doesn't matter. There's always things to improve and further along, especially as we're,
Mm-hmm.
we're marching along to our different goals. And so having someone that's not in the day-to-day of our business that can kind of look and say, hey, I've been through this, I've dealt with this, as you mentioned, not reinventing the wheel, I found tremendous value. I'm fortunate
Yeah.
that because of the podcast, I feel like I get coaching every week from the guests I bring on. And I have a good network of people that I've consulted with. And so this is the first time that I have someone really directly saying, Brad, I'm making you accountable. Here's what we're doing, X, Y, Z. And
Mm-hmm.
it's been game changing for sure.
Yeah, I love that I hear you say that too, because there is something really magical about it. And I think like if we kind of like take our ego down and not really worry about pride, like, I mean, I've been a business owner since 2012. I would love to think that I've, come really far, but I know that I'm not doing that by myself. There's no way that any of us can. And I think sometimes, even from a coaching perspective, sometimes it's really good just to tap in and be like, hey, can I just run this idea by you? Or this is the direction I think I'm headed. What don't I know? Sometimes we don't even know the new questions to ask when we're trying to new things, and each of us are taking our business to the next level and refining and tweaking and modifying. And so I think sometimes, like you were saying, having that neutral party, that it doesn't really matter if they're within your industry or not, because a lot of the coaching is specific to our industry. And then sometimes it's just really good general principles. And also, I love finding out what's on their read list. What book should I be tapping into next, so that I can kind of go through there and see what's going to resonate with me the most. So,
Yeah, you touched on, a question I was going to take this because,
mm,
coaching, do you think it's super important to have someone in your industry? I mean, you mentioned that you've had coaching experience in the past. Has it always been
mhm.
in the design industry? How valuable has it been, networking with people outside your business?
Honestly, that's such a good question. I actually coach both inside the industry and without. So I'm constantly tapping into people within the industry, whether they're peers or coaches. But also, I chose to specifically when I kind of teamed up with my coach last year. I chose a business specific coach. I was looking for someone that could be really holistic with me. And was having a more of a challenge finding that person within my industry. So while I'm listening to a lot of podcasts and doing reading and coaching and things in that capacity from inside, I also feel like, design, as with any industry, you can be super great and creative, but running a business is just a completely different mindset. And as a designer, luckily I came from a business background, so I'm already a hybrid thinker. I'm a numbers nerd and all of that. But to me, to make sure that I can create the foundation for my firm and for my clients that I really want, and making sure that I am elevating my business in the way that I choose for the trajectory of my life, that's really where I find so much value. It's something that I wouldn't be able to, I don't think I would have found the successes that I found as quickly as I did without just linking arms with other people. There's just magic to be found there.
Well, and I want to touch on earlier. I mean, you spoke about mindset a lot, which you can tell. I mean,
Mhm.
anyone listening. I mean, your mind is moving quick, which is amazing, Michelle. I mean, you've processed this, and again, you're sharing that from the habit stacking is a great example that you're
Yeah.
optimizing throughout the day. Mindset as you're dealing with obstacles, because truth be told, you have in your business. We start our business around the same time, you and I.
Yeah.
It's never easy. We have challenging projects. We have projects that on occasion go sideways for right, wrong, and different. There's a lot of reasons that lead to that. Um, how has that been for you, just in life in general, business in general? To create a mindset to be able to overcome obstacles. Any secrets to success with that?
I would say, yes, one of the most impactful books I think ever, that was one of my best crossovers. So like for me, and the crossover is like, how does it impact my personal life? And then how does it impact my working world? It's called The Gap and the Gain. And basically the premise is it's all about how we're looking at things, and when we run into challenges as a business owner, it's like, dang it, they didn't accept my bid, or the client isn't calling, or there's a struggle, or whatever happens. And we all are going to have challenges. It's really the premise of, what are you choosing to focus on? Where is your energy going? And yes, give yourself a minute to be frustrated or angry or whatever your situation may be, and then move on, and just really trying to keep your head in a positive place, which in itself, I mean, I'm a natural optimist. It's always been kind of my jam, except it's really easy to have those frustrations come into our life. We all have them. And so it's about recognizing when you get there, or what can I do to turn that around, or give yourself a minute to just sit in, maybe you feel defeat over an issue or whatever the case may be, and then just really learning how to look at it from a different perspective. And I can't even tell you how many aha moments that I have, when I'm really challenging myself to look at things differently. And I think the more you practice what you're learning, as opposed to just reading the book and then moving on and reading another book and just checking it off the list, for me, it really becomes a practice. And so the more I play around with that, and also just tapping into my husband as my accountability partner, like, call me out when you find I'm doing this kind of thing, because I'm really trying to make changes in my world. And so I found, that is just working really well for me. So what about you? What's your experience been with that? Because it is an entire thing, I think, the category of mindset.
Yeah, actually, I think this is a really good point and a really good topic, because you mentioned the word practice, and I think that's an interesting
Mhm.
term because as we think about athletics, weightlifting, and for you hiking, even, right? I mean,
Yeah.
there's an application there of practice and effort and continual progress that leads to the next step, right? And I think mentally, a lot of us don't realize that, whether it be memorizing. I think anyone that's had to memorize in their profession,
Mhm.
or just have tried it, you'll see that if you continue to memorize things, like, your brain gets stronger, you can memorize things easier, you find techniques, right? And it's funny how that works. And to your point, the mindset, right? There's a practice, there's an effort, and a couple of points as you're speaking about that. One of my first episodes, I had Mark Candelaria on, and he's an architect here in
Mhm.
town, locally, who you most likely know, Michelle. And
Yes.
Mark had an interesting point. He said, in all the years that I've uh, been in business and been in this field, it's a tough field, like architecture, design, construction. It's a really hard field. It's
Mhm.
customer service. You're on the front line all the time, just like the restaurant industry. There's some of these customer service industries for fee that can be really challenging. And he said, "Look, I've had failures in my career, and me internally, I'm dwelling on those failures. I'm thinking about it, like, what if? Why didn't I do this? Like, I should have done this. And these negative
Yeah.
things happen to, they can create some challenges mentally for us in our mindset. But he said, what's funny about that is my peers and clients and colleagues and others don't look at those failures I've had. They just look at Candelaria's doing these amazing projects. And he said, when you think about mindset, a lot of times the we're the biggest self-critic. And so part of mindset is learning how, that we don't dwell on the negative, which we tend to do as humans. And so how do we dwell on the
Mhm.
positive despite the negativity around us? And that's the hard part, right? Is to say, don't focus on your failures, focus on your successes. Easier said than done, but it's hard, in real life. But to your point, it's practice. It's, yeah, I'm having a bad day today. I'm being pretty negative. Well, hold on. Let's take a pause and think, what's happening good today? Where can I find some happiness and joy in this journey? And then,
Yeah.
grabbing on that. And as you mentioned, it's a continual practice to get through.
It 100% is. And I'm really glad that you said that because I literally wrote down sometimes we're our worst critic. And,
Yeah.
for example, in our world, our clients, just like you, they're expecting perfection. The expectation level is really high, especially because people are investing, blood, sweat, tears, emotions, all the things into it. And yet we're perfectly imperfect humans. Everything isn't going to go off without a hitch. And so, how are we dealing with those challenges? How are we dealing with losing a job or losing a bid or whatever the case may be? And you're right. I mean, we are our own worst critics. And so I think just being able to find that balance mentally within yourself that says, hey, you know what? I may not have won that bid, but I'm really still proud of me. Look at how far we've come, and everything may not be working out in the timeline that we're choosing, but you hit it on the nail, or hit the nail on the head when you were saying like other people's perceptions of what it is we're doing or what it is we're saying is so different from our own because we're so close to it. And so it really is a matter of giving yourself a hot minute to go through whatever it is you're going through. And then, okay, how do I focus on the good? Where do I need to take this next so that I almost like use my negative energy as fuel, to be like, you're not getting me, it's just kind of this weird, almost like psych you into something else. It's like when you're at the gym and you're like trying so hard to do a thing and you're like, I can't lick it, but I'm getting it next time. And you're just like hell bent on making sure that that happens. And so sometimes I like to turn that frustration or those negative feelings that I'm having into like almost like a dare or a challenge to myself to make sure that this isn't going to happen again, or we're going to constantly be taking steps forward, or whatever I need to do to kind of make sure that I'm getting out of that negative place so I don't stay stuck there, because it's really easy to stay trapped, honestly.
It's so hard to to sometimes get yourself out of it and not stay trapped. I mean, I
Yeah.
feel, and to your point, I mean, you mentioned you're a very optimistic person, Michelle. I think really
Yeah.
successful entrepreneurs and business owners are optimistic. And to your point of, again, just kind of rehitting this point of practice, I look at how I handle conflict and setbacks and issues, right, with projects that come up.
Mhm.
2013 when I started my company to fast forward 2024, it's very different, right? And how it takes a toll on me. I mean, I'm sure many listening, I mean, I have a fairly young family. And so there'd be times that email comes or that phone call comes or that text comes and your mood changes. And,
Yeah.
and then if I have young ones, I mean, some of my younger kids are growing up now, my youngest is 6, but at the time when they're young and maybe they're screaming or upset or, and you can feel your anxiety, you can feel, and I'm not a really
Hmm.
anxious person, but you can feel that escalating, right?
Sure.
And how work can bleed into personal life. And so you get better understanding, well, if a bad text or email comes through, whatever it may be, how does that set my mood? And then mentally, how do I work around that? And there's different, layers, as you mentioned, that we practice and
Hmm.
you kind of get through. And it's a work in progress. And a lot of us, want this solved today, but mindset is something we have to work through continually.
Yeah, it really is. And I think, part of it is just, I know for myself, I can say like sometimes when those text messages come through, one of the things I've learned is just take a timeout, put myself into timeout and like gather my thoughts and figure out like what are the solutions going to be to the issue and think through them before I jump on that phone call, because I want to service my clients really well. And so a lot of times my natural instinct is just to call them and then, okay, I'll get back to you with a solution. But that isn't always necessarily the best approach. And so I've just kind of learned to just take a time out for a hot minute, evaluate whatever my situation is, and then, try to take my action steps after that. And even sometimes it could be as simple as, like my coach last year introduced a new challenge to our whole team. We were at a leadership retreat and she was like, okay, here's your new challenge for the next quarter. I want you to do these 5 things every single day, 5 days in a row. And the complaining, I mean, we're all business owners. We're all successful in our own rights. And we were like, you're crazy. This doesn't even work for my lifestyle. I can't possibly fit this in. And so there was a lot of rejection. And so then I started eking my way into it. And the more I eked into it, the more I was like, oh, hey, wait, there's so much validity in this. I need to like get over myself for a second and just go all in and try what it is I'm being challenged to do. And then see if it works for me, great. If I need to modify, great. I can always adjust later. And the more I have kind of let go of some of my own preconceived ideas. And the more I've just kind of said, blind faith, I'm going to trust that I hired a coach for a reason. Go for it, all in. Let's just make it happen. The more success I've found and the happier I've been. And so then, of course, I've had to tell her, okay, you're right. Okay, yes, you have so many good ideas. This is exactly why we're teamed up. So I'm thankful for that. And I'm thankful that they continue with love and grace and patience to work with me and to challenge me in that capacity, because I just think we all need it. It's just such a great kind of addition to our life that I think is ever changing. It just continues to give to you the more you're willing to let it in. So
Yeah, I agree. I think that it never hurts to have more people in your corner, right? And
yeah,
no
for
matter what
sure.
that is, that are support for you, because it can be lonely. And when you say lonely at the top, it's not so much lonely like you or I are like leading the industry in our field, right? It's not that. It's just you're running a business, and a lot of
Yeah.
times you're just kind of fighting these battles alone to some extent. I mean, you mentioned your husband has been a good resource for you to kind of play off of at times, but
Yeah.
in a lot of the day-to-day business, it's you, Michelle. Like you're trying to figure
Mhm.
it out with your team, and it's nice to have people in your corner that can kind of counsel you through these things. And it's funny because going back to just the mindset and overall success, it's something that's always stuck with me. They always say when you're having trials and tribulation and going through these issues, you have to keep your head up, right? And we
Mhm.
can understand that things pulling you down, you got to keep that head up, keep that positivity, however it is. And when you're having success, right, you have to keep that head down. And because it's easy for things to get to you, or maybe it's an ego thing, or maybe you let your guard down. But when you're being successful, you got to keep driving, right? It's
Yeah.
that you can't stop. And you look at for me, I always go to athletics. I think that's an easy application. But you see some of the greats, like they wouldn't stop. Like they'd find
Right.
anything they could, Jordan, Brady, any of them, to like they would tear them down. And maybe it was something that wasn't even relevant, but they turned into something much bigger so that they would continue to have their head down and keep driving.
100%. And I think it's interesting too, as you're talking about success, like one of the things that was a really interesting concept in theory for me, even though I think rationally I knew it, like emotionally, I wasn't like in alignment really with my thinking, is what does success mean to you? Because it's a different answer for every single person. And quite honestly, even within your own firm, what you thought of as success when you were very first starting out maybe look different than what it does right now. What your goals and your dreams are now, especially as your kids have gotten older. When I look back about when I was younger and just going into this industry, what I wanted versus where I'm at now and what I'm looking for, that can change. And I think that that's okay. Just allowing yourself enough freedom to also be able to say, this is what success looks like to me personally. And my journey is not going to be the same as anybody else's. What you may be vying for and what I may be vying for, even if we were both in that, we're in our similar industry, but like if we were both designers, just maybe totally different. And yet both of us may be successful in completely our own way, and that's one of the things I think is such a beautiful thing that I didn't really realize when I was younger. I just thought success was a big business with all the people and all the things, but it doesn't have to necessarily have a specific look.
So you mentioned that, and maybe not super specifics, but you mentioned early on you probably had different goals and mindset to
Yeah.
what success was, or where it's going. To now, part of that's life experience,
Yeah.
life circumstance, right? Looking at where you're at now, from when you started your business, what do some of those goals and aspirations look like for Creative Edge Interiors and where you are now, Michelle?
Yeah. I think when I was first starting out, I was just so excited. I felt like, oh my gosh, I've worked all these years. I'm ready. Let's do it. And I just was taking every job, every person. I'm like, I'm here to help. My desire was always to serve our clients. And it's such an important aspect of me as a person. But I think the more that I've kind of grown our firm, the more I've also realized sometimes less is more, and I prefer it that way. And so being much more intentional with the clients that we're working with and making sure the alignment and the synergy is there, just because we are married to our clients for a long period of time. And I want to make sure that we are a really good fit for them. And so even the criteria for taking our clients on, that to me is all wrapped up in part of that success story, in making sure that we understand who are we serving and how are we serving them, and really looking at it from their experience level. It's just, that's such an important factor. Whereas before it was just, we're an awesome firm, come work with us, it's going to be great, end of story. So that part has changed quite a bit, right? I'm sure you have found very similar things in your firm as well. Yes.
Oh, 100%. And really what I wanted to ask you about that is because I know you're very strategic as far as,
Yeah.
okay, there's opportunities of need, and then there's also the win-win, right? For
Mm-hmm.
the super talents of your employees to how they kind of fit in the organization, and, kind of creating that landing zone, and, ability for them to kind of get familiar with the product and move forward.
Mm-hmm.
How has that been for you hiring? Like, any secrets to hiring, company culture, as you've been building the business?
I would say the most important thing for me is that I just really want everyone to feel that they're their own rock star. When I'm hiring people, I will literally say, I am looking for a rock star. I want you to rock your own lane and bring your confidence and your magic, because I need that. And I purposely am always looking for working with team members that have similar skill sets as I do, because there needs to be some crossover there, but also a lot of differences. I want for them to be better in certain ways than I am, because that makes us so much stronger. And I feel like the less we can feel about competition, especially with your own people, we want to put them in an environment where they're learning and growing and challenging. I think from a team perspective, the synergy goes back to that, so I do it almost like, did you ever read The Five Love Languages?
Yeah. Uh-huh.
Okay.
Yeah.
My husband and I
Many
did
years
that
ago.
many,
Yeah.
many years ago, but they
Yeah.
also have it for kids and they also have it for your team members. And so I ask those questions as part of my onboarding, like, how do you learn, so that I can understand how I can better communicate with you? And, I'll ask them what their superpowers are. And every single one of us has kryptonite. Everybody has like things we're not good at, but I want to learn that, because I don't want to pigeonhole them in, but I also want them to know, like, here's your lane and just rock it. Anything you want to learn, you can, but we're going to be dependent upon you for this, so that you're our person. And so it just really works really well in that capacity, because I think everyone just feels elevated and important. And I think by understanding what their love languages are and what their learning style is, it also helps me be a better supporter. And that's something I didn't used to know that much about. I'm like, it used to be just an old school mentality, that I was kind of brought up in the working world, like, I am your boss, and this is what we do, and here's our role, and just go be awesome. But there was so much expectation on everyone. I think that was one of the biggest mistakes I made early on. Is I'm a hybrid thinker, so I was assuming and expecting everyone else to be able to do that as well. And it's really an unfair ask, because that may not be how their brain works. So really understanding, what is in there. I use a Colby test now, for my onboarding also, because it isn't about personality. It's about, how does your brain think, and how do you process, and like, what do you need in order to be successful? And therefore I can make sure that there's enough differences and enough sameness within my team members that we've created that sweet spot, if that makes any sense, right?
Yeah, it does. And I think that's a good example, because you mentioned it's the Colby test, right, that you're
Yeah.
doing.
Yeah.
Those are. And the reason I bring that up, it's really important, because as you think about how your team members, how they think through things, how they process, how they communicate, some I think a lot of people, especially in the creative industry that I've seen, like designers specifically, like you,
Mm-hmm.
Michelle, said, it's kind of hard. Someone could come with a resume, and you're trying to figure out, okay, the talents are one thing, but how
Mm-hmm.
do you fit organizationally? How do you fit communication wise? We're going to be working together. I mean, a lot of us work with our coworkers more than we're at home. So I mean, that's a
Mm-hmm.
big part of like how we get along, and how that influences the space. And more importantly, for you being a creator, like, and instead of just asking the questions like, yeah, this is my resume, here's what I've done, I've been here, here's this, you could say, hey, design me, a kitchen. What does that look like? And see their
Yeah.
presentation, see their, how their mindset goes. And so really what you're getting at, Michelle, is you're trying to find creative ways for them to demonstrate the, not just the capacity, but the integration into your firm.
100%. And I think it's so interesting because it kind of ties back to the coaching conversation from earlier, but it's part of the coaching program that I'm part of. One of the coaches within that program deals specifically with all things team. HR, systems, processes, all of the things. And so anytime you've got situations going on, they're there to coach you. And I just find it so interesting because they were the ones that actually suggested giving test projects to my people as I'm onboarding so that I can see and there have been times where sometimes during the test, I will specifically leave key information out just to see if they're going to catch it. Will they ask me questions? Not everybody is comfortable asking questions, but I want for them to. And so it's just kind of figuring out what is the best way to actually like make sure that they're a good fit because you're right. A resume, it looks amazing, but that doesn't necessarily mean that we're a great fit for one another. Same as every client, every builder, every person that we're trying to just have even friendships with. And so there's so many crossover principles, I think, from our personal and our business life that we can incorporate into everything to be really holistic about it. But I have definitely found that just really seeking for that alignment to make sure that we can work really well together and that we collaborate well and that we're strong as a team is just been a big benefit for me. What are your hiring practices? What's something that you really do to make sure that you're kind of finding that sweet spot as well?
Yeah. And I love the Q&A. I love that you always turn it back to me, Michelle. It's awesome. Yeah, this is something that's taking time for us too. Is right.
Yeah.
There's the investigation and the verification, right, that happens in that interview process. They're getting to interview typically with a few members of our team,
Hmm.
not me, most likely. I mean, I'm typically not involved in the interview process anymore, and there's a reason for that because depending on the department and who's the chair of that department, that's really important. Um, but I think more importantly, after you get through the vetting process, it's the integration. I think one of the things I learned in my Builder 20 is there's a builder, Patrick and Mike Cunningham out of Los Angeles. And I remember they'd say, Brad, for the longest time, we'd hire someone and then it's just kick them off the pier, hope they swim, right? You're going to sink or swim.
Hmm.
And, in construction, I think we do that too often that, hey, we hire them and here you go, here's this huge project and go figure it out and make sure it's right and on time within budget, right? And so we've spent a lot of time internally, like creating systems and protocol and
Hmm.
processes so that anyone steps out, we have a list, right? We have SOP, we have all these different processes so that people know exactly what it takes to get from A to B. Very defined roles. We've worked on understanding they are hired. Here's your role. Here's what you're accountable for. And more importantly, that training, we try to bring people on, and you spoke about this a little bit, Michelle, but
Yeah.
instead of fire mode saying, okay, oh shoot, we have this project hitting, we need this position. We've been working and forecasting that. So we know 12 weeks from now or 16 weeks from now, we need that position. So we have time, we can bring them in, we can have them
Hmm.
shadow, we can integrate. And so I found that when we hire people, the onboarding is really important that they have a week, 2 weeks, 3 weeks of formal schedule day to day of different areas that they're going to touch points in the company and get a good training. And then also that integration and understanding their role. And it really helps for them to become successful and do much better. So that way you're
Hmm.
procuring and taking care of your investment.
I agree 100%. I love what you said about that. And I think like it's just even hitting on that training. That was one of the things I modified that I think probably helped our team the most. I used to just kind of like I said, coming out of the business world, you start a new job, you get a whole bunch of training power packed in the beginning, and they're like, okay, go be awesome. And so what I was finding is that if anyone is like me, my brain works best when I learn a thing and do a thing and kind of get that a little bit under my belt and then just adding to it and adding to it. And so I really actually modified my entire training program to be more similar to that so that I'm not just overwhelming everybody coming in from the get-go. And I'm also not making a lot of assumptions. That was another mistake I used to make, especially with my design team, is I'm assuming because you're a really good designer that you know all these things. And so I didn't have checklists and I didn't have well-defined processes because I was just always telling people this is the flow, but it didn't really allow anybody to work as independently as we would have all liked. And instead of being like a mentor manager, I was a super transactional manager and I didn't want to be because I'm like, I don't want to micromanage. So I don't want to deal with every transaction. I just really want to empower people. And so I was really started studying people more so that I could understand how to make the training more successful so that they could launch more comfortably into their role and just be a lot more grounded in what it is they're doing. Because I think just even giving that your new team members that self-confidence, that in itself is just makes a huge difference.
It's funny that you say that because I think it's so hard. I mean, as we have these conversations, you sit here and you think, we could solve all the world's problems, right? Just, and then you get to the reality of, okay, this sounds great. And then you go in and you're like, okay, but now I got to function day to day and do this. And it is
Yeah.
hard. Like
Yeah.
it's really tough. You mentioned you're sitting down with your coach and your coach's like, Michelle, just do this. Like, here's how you do it. It's,
Mm-hmm.
and you're like, okay, so you're getting this information. I got to go implement it. But I think it's really important to trust because there is time, right? This goes back to it's not going to happen overnight, but essentially creating a realistic expectation,
Mm-hmm.
and then also understanding that, hey, if I'm a transactional person, I have to understand that there's an emotional intelligence, an emotional connection portion, and I have to help them be successful, and I can't micromanage. And so there's a process there, and it takes time, and it's something that's taken me a long time as well. It's taken me a long time to really understand that. I knew when I started my career, some of the successful entrepreneurs that I'd been around, their key thing was you find really good people. They have the tools and training necessary, and they're empowered, right?
Mm-hmm.
And they would say the most important aspect is they're empowered to make decisions, and there's a trust factor with that. But you find that any
Sure.
company really takes off once and I'm sure for you, Michelle, you have team members. You're
Mm-hmm.
like, I know this person's empowered and they can do phenomenal, and that allows us to elevate our brain.
Yeah. 100%. And I think the more that we are able to give them that trust, I think the better off they are. But I think also they're looking for us to be real too. So there's a lot of times that my team will hear me say, like, for example, we're going through a new thing right now, and my success coordinator is taking over my emails. I'm terrified. My coach is like, you can do it. This is going to be awesome. We've already done the calendar. And so we're making these shifts. And I'm saying to my team, this is brand new for me. I'm probably going to complain a little. There's going to be some pushback. I'm going to forget some stuff. So just bear with me, hang in. I'm going to do it. I'm going to learn it too. And so they're seeing that I'm pushing and growing and I'm learning new things too. And I think the more that we can just kind of bring ourselves to the level that says, yes, I am leading this firm. But also, yes, I'm learning just alongside with you as well. We're all just at different phases of that. And I think that I can learn from my staff. That also kind of bolsters their confidence because I am turning to them and looking for them to teach me things as well. And I love that I love that we have that dynamic. I think it's so important.
So walk through this because I know I've heard you say this before. Champagne client,
Oh yeah, yeah,
right?
yeah.
As we pivot this, I want to learn more about your champagne client.
Champagne client for me is really so basically peeling away all the levels. I do a lot of things called balconies. Like you're looking at from the balcony, which is just no emotion. You're just looking at the facts. And the facts for me were, who do I vibe the best with and why? What are important to me in working with a client? Like what kind of characteristics do they have? All kinds of things. And so it really isn't, some design firms are like, hey, we'll only work if it's this price. And some are like, it will only work if it's this look. And so everybody's kind of got their own criteria. And so for me, that champagne client is really going to be an alignment of personality. It's going to be an alignment in how quickly they make decisions, how receptive are they to collaboration. And so we've got all of these little checkpoints, and that we can kind of tell as we're meeting clients for the first time. If someone's calling us for the very first time, we'll have a consultation with them over the phone, just really kind of get that data and just make sure that we feel not only are they a good fit for our team, but that we are a good fit for theirs. It's just as important for them to vet us as it is for us to vet them, so that we can make sure, like you were saying, we're going to be married for a while with our clients. And so we just really want to make sure that fit is just right. And so we have that criteria. And so then after that first consultation, we'll go and meet with them live. And that's kind of that affirmation. Is there any red flags that we're feeling? Like, how do we just make sure that this is just going to be a really great opportunity for both of us? And then making sure that we sit down and just really kind of talk about what our process is, and making sure that our workflow also vibes with what their expectations are going to be. Are we going to be able to meet their need, whether it's a timing or the way in which we work or the way in which we communicate? And so making sure that all of those are kind of checked off in there, it has just really changed the dynamic of our business. the stress level has gone immensely down because some people out there, for example, litigators by nature, that's their passion, that they're so good at that. They're meant for that. But not everybody else on the other side receives that kind of feedback in that capacity. And so that's kind of like things that we would be looking out for about how are we communicating and things like that. So do
So
you do that in your firm as well?
I do, and maybe let me ask you this first. So what's
Yeah,
interesting is going back to the practice thing. How you know your vetting and interview process? I'm sure there's a lot of different clients, and you mentioned is a mutual thing. We're not
yeah,
only being interviewed for a project, we're interviewing the client because you want to make sure it's a good fit. There's
sure.
a lot to be tied, over the next while that you're going to be working together.
Yes.
How is that vetting process and understanding the champagne client? How has that changed over the years?
I think again, it just kind of goes back to getting to the point in your business where you choose to be selective in a different capacity. In the beginning, when I started my firm, we were just taking work because we needed volume, and our focus was volume. And so there was also a sense of pride at that time because I was a project manager at heart. That's my background. There was like a sense of pride, I guess, if you will, that I was like, we're running blah, 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 number of jobs all at the same time. Look at us. And then meanwhile, in the background on your face is like so happy, but in the background, you're like, I'm going to lose my mind. This is so much. And so I think as I've really studied my business and what works well for us and what cadence do we choose, that was part of it, is just really deciding, how are we choosing our projects and at what point are we even onboarding projects? I didn't even used to have that as part of my system. If a client signed, oh my gosh, we got their money, we have to start right away. But that didn't really serve the people that I was already knee deep in, allowing
Mhm.
us to finish those expectations or finish our deadlines and things like that. And so just even slowing things down and choosing to explain to client what our onboarding process is, and we still need your retainer and your signed proposal to get us, to get you into the work queue, but that doesn't necessarily mean we can instantly jump. And I think I've just really learned the more that we communicate and really kind of set that expectation up front with the client so that they know what to expect. We also changed our entire workflow so that even in the times during our process where we are quiet in the client's mind, they're still getting communicated with. So they know exactly what we're doing behind the scenes, what to expect next, what's going to go down. And completely changed it's just completely changed the way we work. And I think that the success level and the happiness level over the projects that we're having as well from our end and our clients' end, and honestly, our builders' end, because we loop that communication all the way through and just really create that teaming. And it just kind of really actually works really well. The magic is there for sure.
Yeah, I love that you shared all that because, as you're sharing that, I was thinking about just internally, and it has changed. I think a lot of us can appreciate that, we're excited to get the jobs. And as you mentioned,
Mm-hmm.
hey, another one starts. Yep, let's go. There's a builder in Utah, Richard Jaffe's in our builder 20 built in Park City. And he's been building for like 65 years. I mean, it's pretty
Yeah.
amazing. And yeah, he's been doing a long time. And he always says builders specifically die of indigestion as opposed to starvation. And essentially, his point is that a lot of us, like you said early on, you're just kind of bringing anything to the table,
Mm-hmm.
whether it's a numbers thing, whether it's a status thing, whether it's just, hey, I'm fearful of not having it. And
Yeah.
I haven't built a name or reputation, so I got to keep going. And it becomes more refined and strategized in the future that now you're saying, hey, not only do we have good clients right now because we've learned our process and we know who's an ideal client, but even further, we're onboarding them, which means they're an ideal client. But hey, you're a great client for me, Michelle, but you get to wait a little bit. But here's the benefit. And
Yeah.
I think anyone, as you become more experienced, you kind of understand how to communicate that properly so that they're engaged still and know that, hey, I'm in good hands with Michelle and her team.
100%. And I think if I was the client, a lot of times that's what we do in my world is we're always putting ourselves in the client's shoes. What are they seeing and what are they thinking? What are they feeling from their perspective? And if somebody were to say to me, you are valuable to me and I can't wait to start your project, I'm going to finish these deadlines so that I can then turn my focus to you and this client will be well taken care of. They know that they're going to receive that same service and it makes perfect sense. It's just a matter of how we're communicating that and making sure that we are showing our clients how it's going to benefit them and what value is going to come from that. And it's not that there aren't certain elements that are happening in our process in the very early days that would still be some interactions with them. But for the most part, they understand this is truly when we kick it off. This is what we do. And it's a celebration. I mean, we start the project with a celebration because we're getting ready to start this amazing journey together. And then we end it with a celebration as well. And we have those kind of like fun joy moments all throughout, because there are definitely times to celebrate when they reach these milestones. It's like, you guys, you did great. Check you out, And so it just changes the cadence. And I think it makes it a lot more fun. And it also kind of eliminates a lot of the stress and pressure from their worlds. The more we can take the stress of any, new build or renovation, the more we can take that away from them, and still allow them to feel completely in control, then that's a sweet spot in itself. And it just takes time to kind of learn that.
It's funny because I don't know what it is about construction, design, architecture. Maybe it's our industry, but I think a lot of us are hesitant to walk a client through, whether it be accurate timelines or budgets or
Mm-hmm.
start dates, whatever it is, right? And the reason I bring it up is because in the world, a good example, like plastic surgery, right? So
Mm-hmm.
someone else has a plastic surgery done, a really good doctor they're going to reach out to. It's not like, hey, yeah, I'll see you next week. Like,
Right.
come on in. They're going to be, okay, great. You're going to pay this deposit and I'll see you in 10 months,
Mm-hmm.
right?
Yeah.
Because my backlog. And it just is what it is. And you're like, hey, I'm willing to wait
Right.
for this expert because they're an expert in their field. And I understand it's high demand. And
Mm-hmm.
yeah, it's fine. That's just part of the process. For some reason, we feel like, not that we have to people please, but we're in a different industry. So we have to service them. We have to figure it out. And a lot of times we end up dropping the ball and juggling too many things. And to your point, Michelle, that we can actually guide the client and say, and I've learned this with estimating. I think so many times we've rushed the process to get numbers to a client and get accurate bids or enough subs bidding on it. And so it's taken time where we go to a client with a very defined plan. And I found that if we communicate and we're laying that expectation out, they're like, no problem. Perfect. Okay.
Yeah.
Sounds great. We'll see you at this next stage when you get to that point.
Exactly. And I think that we're all going to have that. I mean, I still run into situations where I feel that same pressure, like, oh, dang it, I made this commitment. I want to honor that. But if I need to be a day or two late in order to be accurate and on point, then I would rather call the client and say, hey, how would you feel about this? I've got a couple more things I need to button up. I would rather communicate that to them and let them know, just give me a couple more days so that they know the reasons behind it is for accuracy. If I'm going to go in and, if I would have forgotten some things, or maybe I did push that button, and then you are having to go back sometimes and make amendments. And people are people. We're all humans. It's trial and error, and we're doing the best that we can. But at the same time, I just think if we're able to communicate that, I just have found for myself, our success ratio is a lot higher because we're just taking just a hot minute and just allowing it to happen a little bit of a different capacity, even if it's different than what we thought it would be going into it. As long as we're communicating that most of the time, in my mind, that's fine. Unless, it would be little bit of a different story if every single time you're just delaying, and you're not able to, hit any of the deadlines. That might be a little bit of a different challenge. But I think for the most part, the communication is really going to be the key, and just bringing it always back to that client.
So what drives you crazy about working with us contractors?
What drives me crazy? I come from the build world. I actually love being in the field. I'm super nerdy about it. Like I love that side of things. I think one thing that would be challenging is, and not to say that I haven't done this myself, so I'm calling myself out on this one also, is sometimes it can be really hard with last minute meetings, because
Yep.
we schedule ourselves out weeks in advance sometimes. And even on our days where we're like, hey, these are my field days and these are my office days, even if we're talking in advance that we know we need to pre-schedule something, it's going to happen. And we try to be as flexible as we possibly can, because we know when we make that call, we're going to need help as well. But sometimes that can be really tricky especially when we're talking about dry run for flooring or tile, or some of our bigger meetings, at milestones during the build process, and wanting to make sure that we get those pre-scheduled. So we try to be as proactive as we can and reach out and be like, hey, when do we want to be on site? When do you need us there? When do you need information? So we're trying to stay ahead of the game. But there are definitely times when we don't always stay ahead of the game, and then we're scrambling behind the scenes to be like, okay, we got to make sure that we are not the delay of the project. That's what our intention is, at least. So
So you mentioned you were in the building industry previously, like
Oh yeah.
previous experience before starting Creative Edge Interiors.
I worked in the office furniture for 10 years back in the day, and it was a really wonderful position. I learned a lot about business. Probably the best boss I ever had came from that firm, except I just wasn't passionate about it. I knew it wasn't my home. So my father actually had called me out of the blue one day, and he was a residential contractor, and he had asked, hey, leave your job and come build my business. You have all the skill set other than knowing our industry, which I'll teach you. And I'm like, I don't know how to do this. I was freaking out. So fast forward through lots of prayer, lots of faith, lots of conversations, ended up leaving a very like financially secure job. And that was my foray into construction, into small business, into business ownership, into all of the things. And it wasn't long after I had started with him. And, part of my job for him, the main focus outside of like growing his firm, was to do the bids. And I just was realizing I didn't even know what to ask these guys. I certainly didn't feel trained to be a liaison for these clients to help them understand what to expect in the process. And so I just, went to him one day and was like, look, I need to work with the guys in the field. You got to put me in there. I got to get some hands-on experience so that I understand what's normal, what's not normal. I don't even know how to explain that right now. And so that was the hardest year ever of my life, but it was the best education I could have ever received as the foundation for getting started in this industry, because I was able to see, what questions do I need to ask, but also what the guys in the field are needing from the design side of things. And at the time, I just was a creative. My whole family is creative. So I've been drawing houses and doing people's homes my whole life. And it wasn't really until I started working with him, and it was no big deal picking tile and things like that. But once we started like, okay, now we need plumbing drawings or we need electrical, and he wanted to get into new builds. And I'm like, yo, time out. Really need to get some education on this because I do not know how to do that. And I just feel uncomfortable trying to take that on. I'm not the right girl yet. And so that's how I kind of went into school, but I already had such a great foundation. So even in my drafting class, when they started talking about the pitch of a roof, and I was like, gotcha, just built that. So it really just created such a different perspective. And I think that has just really helped us be so builder centric, that we can work with any builder out there and any architect out there and just really look at it from the aspect of like, we are a cog in this wheel, and each one of us is bringing our superpower to the table. And each one of us has a different perspective that really makes the project successful as a whole. And so where are the crossover, and how do we need to just really enhance what's currently happening with these dream teams that our client is putting together, or that the builder or the architect is calling, and just really making sure that we are a true asset. But I think coming from the aspect that said, like, I was in the field with the guys and I could see how hard it would be. And so a lot of times, even as we're doing our drawings, I'll say to my team, if you were the guy in the field building this and you didn't know anything that we'd been going through, when you read this, can you build it without problem? And it just really helps us change the perspective that we have. And I like that. I think it's been massively beneficial for us.
Well, it's incredible. I mean, looking at where you're at now, did you ever think you'd be at this level, starting now with the design with Creative Edge Interiors?
I dreamed about it. I always dreamed about it. Like for me, I think I was so blessed in the fact that when I was raised, my parents, they didn't have boy jobs, girl jobs. They had nothing. If you want it, you go get it. The sky is the limit. There are no limitations except right here. So just go. And I think I've just always kind of had that mentality, like, I can do whatever I want to do. What do I want to do? And so it's exciting to actually like be here though. It's exciting to continually create options and opportunities for myself and for my firm that just allow us to just continually have fun and stretch the bar and decide where we want to go next. And that part I love. I really, really love that part.
Oh, that's incredible. And
Yeah.
you've been amazing, Michelle. And just can't thank you enough. I want to be sensitive to your time too for sharing with our audience. I know that part of this is I want to know what you do for fun. I mean, you mentioned hiking
Yeah.
and stuff, but I'd be curious
Yeah.
what you do for fun, as well as I believe you have an obsession with fast cars and motorcycles too. So
Absolutely. 100% for that. My whole life, like almost everybody in my family rides motorcycles. We love fast cars, all the things. It's just been a passion of mine for a long time. My husband doesn't ride motorcycles. And my older brother does, but his wife doesn't necessarily love it either. And so he and I are riding partners, and we've been doing that for many, many years. And we just travel the state. We've gone out of state on excursions. And my biggest passion, I mean, outside of the fact that it's just this immense sense of freedom. If you ride motorcycles, you probably can relate to that. But I'm tasked with like being the photographer. So I've just like honed in on this skill while we're flying down the road and just capturing all of our moments in film, whether it's still or video or whatever. And we just have a blast. And I think anything in life inspires me, but being out in nature and seeing the color and the texture and going to all these new places, it's just an extension of like bringing all of that together. I wish I had one of those like minds that literally photographed everything. But I try to do that with my actual camera. So you'll always see me taking pictures everywhere we go.
Oh, that's amazing. That's incredible.
Yeah.
What's upcoming and exciting?
What's upcoming and exciting? We actually have a top secret project that we're working on right now that I can't actually
Wow.
tell you about, but it is potentially international and also definitely all
Wow.
throughout the States. And I'm super excited. It's in the works. It's a really cool collaboration and to be determined. So maybe when we get together next time, I'll be able to share how we got started in that and how we're doing with that and all the things. So yeah, I'm super excited. What about for you? Do you have anything massive going on in your world that you're super stoked about?
Yeah, I guess
Yeah.
as this is live, something that is official that I'll be announcing is we're building our own home, and we haven't done that yet. So we've, been
Nice.
working on building our business, and we're going to be building our personal home, which is going to be a model home for AFT as well. But my wife and I and our family were super excited. It's going to be a really, really fun project. So,
That's exciting.
uh,
Congratulations.
yeah,
That's awesome.
thanks. Yeah, and we have some very exciting things coming up. There's probably like you, I have one business venture that we'll be announcing later this year.
Yeah.
That I can't share yet, but it's very exciting. So it should be taking place end of this year, and a couple busy things happening. So
Yeah.
it's can't complain. Very blessed. So
Exactly. Exactly. It's always good to have options and opportunity. If we cultivate that, then there's always excitement in our worlds, no matter what happens. So,
yeah, absolutely, Michelle, you've been
yeah.
amazing. So for those listening that want to connect, where can they find you?
Creative Edge Interiors is our firm, and you can find us under that as our website, also on Instagram, LinkedIn, all the platforms. So, yeah, love it. Thank you so much for having me on. You're such a cool guy. I was really excited about this. Really great conversationalist. I appreciate your time. Thank you. It's been a blast.
Likewise, thanks, Michelle.
Yeah, you bet.
If you get value from the show, please support us by giving a 5-star rating and review on whatever platform you listen to. And I also have a favor to ask. We've had some incredible guests that come on and share their wisdom, their knowledge about their business. So if you have friends or family members that could benefit from those episodes, please share it with them, as well as any other business owners that you're networking with that could get value from the podcast or certain episodes. Please share those as well. Again, subscribe, make sure you're following. Any questions that you have, topics. We've had listeners reach out about certain guests that we should have on the show. Again, brad.l@aftconstruction.com. Email me for topics to address, guests that we should have on, and even if you think you'd be a great guest for the show. So again, thank you for all your support, and we'll see you next time.